Hi everyone, I'm Anoop Namboodiri. I'm a Principal Quality Assurance Engineer with Oracle Trivandrum. I have 15 years of industry experience and 8 plus years of experience working with Agile projects. I have handled the role of a Scrum Master for multiple projects. I'm a PMI Agile Certified Professional. With this video, I would like to give you a practical approach on Agile estimation and planning. So let's dive into it. In traditional waterfall projects, we have what is called an iron triangle of budget, scope, and schedule. These are fixed, and any change to one of these is going to stretch the other two. Any change in scope causes budget and schedule to change too. In Agile, scope is variable, even if budget and schedule are fixed. This doesn't mean that Agile is unpredictable. Rather, it means that Agile will prioritize its deliveries to ensure that maximum value is being delivered. The minimum viable product will always be prioritized, followed by the addition of other less priority features. We can visualize this as an iron vase, which we are filling with scope, that is, the most valuable features. This is where story prioritization and planning comes in. The highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Estimating and planning is not easy. The schedule of a project may vary widely from the initial estimates as seen from the cone of uncertainty. The agile planning strives to ensure that a reliable cadence is achieved. At the end of every iteration, the estimates get more and more predictable. The team utilizes their experience to make more accurate estimates. This self-organizing nature of the team is crucial to Agile. Estimation is typically performed against primarily backlog items and is used to work out how long portions of the backlog might take. So we know velocity. Velocity is a measure of the number of estimation units that a team tends to complete from sprint to sprint. After their first few sprints, most teams will achieve a reasonably consistent velocity, and armed with this velocity and estimates on the primary backlog items, teams can predict more accurately how long the portions of the backlog will take to complete. So estimates give you that idea. Tracking is a bit different. So tracking actually refers to the monitoring of the progress of a sprint to be sure that all stories included within the sprint is delivered. Tracking is often performed by breaking down the stories into subtasks and applying our estimates to them during sprint planning, then monitoring the remaining time in a burn down during the sprint. It is important to note the difference between an estimate and a commitment. Usually when we commit to a work item, there is a tendency to add some buffer to ensure that we don't miss the commitment, as you can see in this example. With estimation, the purpose is to identify the true level of effort required without the pressure of committing to it. It is understood by the entire team that this will not be exact, at least at first, and the team agrees to this. So there is a lesser level of variability that can be assigned to estimate as against when we commit to a work item. This is also where the concept of relative estimation comes in. We are not estimating the size of a story or work item in absolute terms. We are identifying the relative size of it. For example, consider a story for adding a field onto a page. Let's say a text box. Let us say that we estimate the size of this story as X units. There is also another story for adding a field and a button to a page. At the time of planning, we may not know the exact size of it, but we can infer that the size of the second story may be about twice the size of the first, that is 2x units. In both cases, X is arbitrary and decided by the team. But here we are relatively sizing the two stories. This brings us to story points. Story point is a unit that we attach to a story as a measure of its relative size. In the example we discussed earlier, if the first story has a size or estimate of one story point, we can estimate the second story at two story points. We will now see a few techniques of estimation. It is to be noted that estimation must be a collaborative process with participation from the entire team, whether it is development or QA. Planning poker is the most widely used method. Each team member will assign a number to the story. The common method that is used for this numbering is the Fibonacci series or a modified Fibonacci series, let's say like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, 20. The number shouldn't really have to do with the time actually required to complete this. Rather, it should establish a relative sizing of the stories as we saw earlier. If a story is too big, it should ideally be broken down into smaller sizes. The ideal way to approach this, or not the ideal way, an example or a simple way to approach this is to first of all identify a story which can be considered as the smallest and then use it for your estimation. Another method is to use t-shirt sizing to estimate the stories. This is again a relative method with applying the sizes like small, medium, large, extra large, etc. Similar to what we have for t-shirts. Again, it is important to note that this is a relative estimation performed comparing the stories. Affinity estimation is to find the similarities of these user stories to be estimated. So the task of the team is to group similar stories. The best way to find similarity is to visualize the process. For example, by providing a sizing chart in a room and on a wall, and each team member looking at the stories and sticking their stories to the group they feel matches the most. It is better to have the whole team within a single room when we are doing this. Now let's look at some practical tips. The first point is to ensure a curated product backlog. We need to ensure that we have a set of stories which have been prioritized, and these stories should have all the required details, such as the description, the purpose, as well as the acceptance criteria. This is important because the team needs to know what they are getting into. What is the estimate that they are going to make? What is the story on which they are doing the estimate? So this is a very important part of the process. The next point is to keep estimates manageable. Sometimes you'll be able to immediately understand by just looking at a story that you will not be able to finish the story in a single sprint. In such cases, the team needs to make a conversation with the product owner to ensure that these very large stories are broken down into smaller chunks which are manageable and fits within a sprint. Choose an estimation method that the team is comfortable with. The whole team needs to be involved in choosing the estimation process. They all need to understand what is the kind of relative estimation that they are going to make. This is very important. Also, the whole team needs to be involved even during the estimation. Nobody should stay silent. Everyone needs to have an opinion as to what the size of the story could be. And there has to be active discussion that happens between the team members to arrive at the proper estimate. For example, a development engineer may think that a story is very small because it only requires a minor code change. Whereas for the quality assurance engineer, they might think that this is a story that requires extensive level of regression testing. So they may think that it is a story of very large size. So in such situations, the entire team needs to have a discussion and arrive at a consensus as to what is the size of the story, what is the true nature of the story, and what is the true estimate of it. As the team matures and as the team members mature within the team, they will be able to make better estimates for each story. So use your experience in estimating previously similar stories and to identify the estimates for new stories. The final point is to add only estimated stories to the sprint. So before taking up any story into a sprint, we need to ensure that these are all properly estimated. Of course, it can happen so that suddenly a higher priority story may arrive mid sprint. But even then, if we have an idea of the estimate of the incoming story and we know about the estimates of the stories that we have, it will be easier to understand which stories needs to be moved out in order to incorporate the new story. Here you can see a product backlog with just 3 issues, 3 stories. None of them have been. So this is where you can see the story points associated with the story. None of these have been estimated. So you will have an estimation or a planning or a grooming meeting where you will go through the story, and as a team you will provide an estimate. So in order to provide this estimate, we just need to go with this to so sometimes this might be closed. If it is closed, you can just click on it and the sidebar will open and you provide a story point to it. I'll use t-shirt sizing here, so I will just say that this is a medium size story maybe. Okay, so this is not configured for medium sizing. I'll just provide a Fibonacci series. I'll follow the Fibonacci series and say that, okay, this requires 3 story points for me to create a login page. And similarly for a home page, let's say this requires a bit more effort because I have a bit more data to put into this page. So I will say it requires 5 story points. And the home page content again, I will say this requires 8 story points. So this is the process. When you actually plan the sprint, when you actually create the sprint, you will drag and drop, you will look at the stories, you will look at the story points, you will look at the priority of the stories. So you can see that the first one is highest priority, second one is high, third one is a bit medium priority. So depending upon their priority and their estimates, you pull them into your sprint. As you see here, you can pull them into the sprint. Yeah, so I have decided that these are the 2 stories that I'm going to be doing in the sprint. And I can go ahead and start the sprint. Okay, I'm taking the duration as 2 weeks and I'll start the sprint. So once my sprint is started, these 2 stories will come into this as our Scrum board, where you can see the to do, in progress, and done buckets. And then the normal process of the sprint will follow. These are some of the different references that I have used for this video, and you are free to take a look at them. So these are all very good resources to understand further. So thanks everyone.